Welcome to today's episode of Design Your Life, our first ever podcast. Today I'm joined by the legendary Canadian designer Bruce Mao. Bruce is a critically acclaimed designer and author of MC24, founder of Bruce Mao Studio, and co-founder and CEO of Massive Change Network alongside his wonderful life partner, Bisi Williams. Bruce and Bisi have been in Sydney for the past 6 weeks, working closely with the team at UNSW's Arts, Design and Architecture faculty on his massive action showcase, tackling some of the world's most pressing problems. I've long admired Bruce's work and resonated with his similar journey growing up in Canada in the 60s to starting out our design careers at Pentagram London and our similar ethos on the power of design to create a better world. He's a subject of a documentary in his life, an approach to design called Mao, and has worked with legendary brands, cities, and countries all over the world, working with them on tackling thorny problems and transform the way that they exist holistically. Hey, Bruce, it is so cool to catch up with you today in Sydney.
Good to see you.
It's been wonderful to see you and to see the massive action workshop that you guys did in UNSW here in Sydney. Mm-hmm. Spectacular. You talked me through the exhibition, the process, all the work that was done over a few weeks of work.
Yeah, 4 weeks.
Yeah, wow. So how did it all start? Because I went to a workshop of yours in Brisbane in I think it was like 2013 or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Massive Change was what it was all about. This one in Sydney's Massive Action. And how did the whole Massive Action and Change come about?
Well, we did Massive Change as a project in 2004. Mm-hmm. And it really was about our capacity to shape the world. It was basically saying, look, design is much more, it's much more than just our the way things look. It's really about our capacity to produce our future.
Yeah.
And the way that we live. And it's really, fundamental to our success as a society and a species, and especially our ongoing, place in our ecology and our future on Earth. And so, but when we did Massive Change, what we discovered was that people were really inspired. It was very successful, but what they really wanted to know was how to do it. They at the end of the exhibit, there was a space for them to kind of ask questions or give comments, and overwhelmingly it was, we're inspired, we love this, but we want to do it. How do we do it? And we realized that we actually didn't know how to do that back then. We didn't have the answer to that. And that's really what sparked the creation of the MC24 principles, which is really how to do it. And that led to Massive Action, which is really the project to give people the capacity to design their world and their life. And that's what we're doing here with UNSW and here in Sydney.
Yeah. It's so cool catching up with you at UNSW earlier. You and BC, and just walking around the exhibition space and seeing what you guys have done over the last month with the college there. Spectacular. How does it work with you two? How'd you meet, and how does it all work? I found it. I work with Luca, who's my son, but that can be hot and cold at times, but mostly good. How do you guys make it all happen?
Well, BC has been in the work for the whole time. So even though she was a mom for a long time and really focused on that, she was always there as part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then as the girls got, sort of more, as they kind of went off to university, and she got more liberated from that burden.
Yeah. Burden?
That's a burden. I mean, the mom work was intense.
Right.
So as that kind of diminished, she took more of a kind of role in the studio.
Yeah.
And we really, she has the role of Chief Insights Officer, is how we define it. And she has a kind of, she comes from a much more literary, historical kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And so it makes a very interesting kind of collaboration where, I don't have a kind of deep historical knowledge or a real education. I mean, my education was really brief. It was only 18 months.
What the hell? Why did I interview you for? She should have been on this podcast.
Exactly. She's actually educated.
But you're not.
And I'm
actually, not. I did 2 years. That's close to 18 months. Isn't it? Just a little over.
Yeah. So she has a kind of, but not only is she educated, she has a kind of really comprehensive knowledge of the history of culture.
Yeah.
So she can kind of place things historically in cultural transformation that is really super helpful.
Yeah.
So that when we're doing things, if I'm kind of inventing something, she can contextualize it in a way that is really powerful.
And so yin and yang.
Yeah, it's a collaboration that is really extraordinary and has been a really important part of the work.
I mean, what's the likelihood of that happening in life? Did that happen by chance, or did you go, you know what, I got to go out there and find someone really smart to make me look good because I'm a fraud? No, I'm just a graphic designer. No, I know. Well, was it just by chance?
Mean, it's been it just is. It's an extraordinary relationship, and the moment that I met Bisi, she came to lunch at the studio with a friend of mine, and when I saw her come to lunch, I thought, I'm kind of hungry, and
well, your eyes still light up when you talk about it,
and that's for sure. And I have a very vivid memory of the lunch, but I don't recall Steve being there.
They weren't together, I hope.
No.
Okay,
she was
good.
just visiting. She was just visiting a friend. And we have. I mean, it started. It started a great adventure, and we celebrated our 30th anniversary here in Sydney.
Oh wow!
So
congratulations.
3 decades. It's been an incredible adventure.
Well, it's incredible, and I think that let's go back to your childhood, because obviously we're not born designers. Yeah, we come from somewhere, and our upbringing is very instrumental into the people that we become and our view on the world. We have very similar kind of backgrounds. I was brought up in Canada, you too, and we went to Pentagram too at different times in London. And so it's really interesting, and also that just kind of this deep down desire that I want to help people. I want to help individuals and organizations to be the best they can be. My whole business is about designing a better world. With each and every opportunity that we have, I want to be doing the right thing. But it's interesting that not everybody thinks that way. And I kind of presumed that every designer had that same kind of determination and wanting to do that. Not because of the massive trouble that we're in as a country, in the world. But let's just talk about, what made you what you are today? Like, how did it all start?
Well, I grew up on a farm outside of a mining town in northern Canada, and there wasn't a lot of talk about design, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We lived. Our house was on a rocky hill, which meant that you couldn't get running water in the house during the winter months.
Wow.
So my job as a young man was to go to the well on my snowmobile during the winter and provide water to the house every day before I went off to school. And that experience, as I grew up and I eventually went to college and became a designer, I thought that those two worlds were kind of separate worlds. That my life on the farm was my farm life, and my life in the city was my kind of urban life and design life. and that they were completely different worlds. But the more I worked, and the more I got, especially the more I thought about designing in a bigger sense and massive change, I realized that actually that experience of providing water to the household was an experience, first of all, that I share with about 1 billion people.
Yeah.
So about 1 billion people don't have access to water. And I really understand what it takes to do that, just the kind of physical work and the weight of the water, and just how much it takes, and what it means to have to do that every day. And that kind of empathy, in some ways, is at the core of design practice. Like what you're describing, caring about people, that's what design is about for me. Like the core methodology of design is caring.
Yeah.
And it's why I think so many designers are involved in the big conversations of our time. Because if you care about the individual, the user, we talk about, user-centered design. If you care about the individual, you can't have a healthy individual, a thriving individual in a toxic community. So you have to care about their context. If you care about their context, you can't have a thriving community in a toxic ecology. So you have to care about their ecology.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, you're actually thinking about the person in context of the ecology. And that takes us to what we call life-centered design, really thinking about designing for life and not just for the person.
Yeah.
And really shifting our whole kind of orientation to caring for country, as you would say in Australia, but caring for life, as we say it. But I think that you're absolutely right, that ultimately it's about caring. That's the real kind of methodology of design.
Yeah. All the things that you kind of told, love, empathy, caring, looking out for each other, the whole kind of philosophy of what goes around comes around, give and take, doing good.
Design
it's become more and more of, people are kind of getting it more than ever before. It used to be seen as hokey, it used to be seen as alternative, and that's become the norm, right?
Yeah, and design is how to operationalize that.
Yeah.
Right? Like design is a method
plan
for caring.
Yeah.
Caring is an emotion.
Yeah.
Design is a method. So design takes that emotion and makes it a method and gives you a way to do it. And when you look at the outcomes, I had to do a lecture on the Cooper Hewitt collection, the collection of the Smithsonian, on the design collection. And I was trying to understand, because they have, in their collection, they have every conceivable kind of design object. And I was trying to understand, what is the commonality? What do all these different things have in common? And I realized the common denominator is caring. That a great design thing, the thing that separates it from other things, is that someone cared more. And they were able to kind of translate that caring into the object, into the system, right?
Interesting. Do you think that snowmobile that you wrote was someone had the same kind of approach to designing it, thinking I'm actually caring about this young kid, or you design transport that works in that environment?
I mean, if you think about the way that you live a designed life. Right? Your life is really kind of defined by designers. So the kind of experiences you have, you're inside of a designed environment, you're interacting with designed interfaces, you're driving designed products through designed infrastructure. Even your interaction with the natural world is often an designed interface.
Yeah.
It's actually a designed. Like someone was telling me that they went to the Blue Mountains. A lot of it was inaccessible because of the mudslides and that the trails were off limits. So our designed interface was broken.
Yeah.
Right? So we couldn't have our natural experience.
Saved your life, but
because because it had been damaged.
Overcautious, probably.
So we actually designed that interface.
Yeah.
And that's really, so that means that we need to think about design in this kind of holistic way to say, well, actually, since our life is designed, we can redesign it.
Yeah.
Right? Since it is designed, if we're not happy with the design, if we're not happy with especially the implications of the design, the kind of unintended consequences, the environmental costs, we can redesign it. We can change it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And I mean, we are, obviously, I did a book called Design Your Life back in 2014, and this podcast is Design Your Life, and I passionately believe that us as human beings have the opportunity to design our lives, to actually design a better life for ourselves. Because unless we do that, unless we find the thing that makes us happy, gives us joy, gives us a purpose, you kind of like living day to day by hope and chance. You might not have connected with the thing that you love, and that's so important for all of us. And to have a life of purpose makes a massive difference. We're fortunate to have found that thing. So many people, you might have found that when you do talks, people come up to me afterwards and say, hey, you're lucky, you've got great work, you do great work, or you have great opportunities. I go, it's not by chance that it happened. It's not by magic that it happened. You too have the opportunity. What is it that people, in your experience, that people feel that they don't have that opportunity, or maybe they haven't found the thing that they love deeply, the thing they connect with?
It's a very interesting question. And one of the MC24 principles is work on what you love. And it's the last principle in the book. It's, for the longest time, I wasn't confident that it should be a principle.
Yeah.
I thought, maybe it's just too sentimental. And, but in the end, I realized it's maybe the most important principle of all.
Yeah.
Because it's the one that almost all students ask me about. They don't use the word love because it's too uncool.
Yeah.
But what they want to know is, how do I get from here to there?
Yeah.
Like, they can see that I have somehow figured out how to have a life of ideas and beauty and questions and, kind of imagination. And they want to know that's the life that they want. That's what they signed up for when they kind of went into design school or art school. And that's what they're trying to get to. And they want to know how to get there. And, in that chapter, essentially what I outline is the idea that you have to put out a pure signal. Because ultimately what you really have to do is figure out what your signal is.
Yeah.
Like, what is your message so that people can find you? Right? So, because you want to do something. You have a voice. You have an idea. You have a kind of sensibility, a message, a kind of way of seeing things. You need to put that into the world in a pure enough way that across the world somewhere, there's a person out there who's trying to do something, and you're exactly the right person for them.
Yeah.
And they need to find you, and you need to find them. And they'll only find you if you put out that pure signal. And the more you compromise it, working on things that don't have meaning, working on things that are, in some cases, contradictory.
Yeah, compromised.
Compromised, muddled in some way. It makes it harder for them to find you.
Yeah.
And so you have to design your life to allow yourself to do those things.
Yeah.
And it's a very challenging thing to do. I mean, in my case, I lived like a student for decades in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I lived very, very modestly so that I could put out that pure signal. And I designed ways of working with clients. I had a client in Toronto that was a new music concerts client. They had very little money. They needed posters.
Yeah.
I said, look, I'll do them. You can only say yes or no. You can't change anything.
Yeah.
Because you don't have enough money to change them.
Yeah.
You're not paying enough. So if you say no, I'll do another one. And if you say no again, I'll do another one. I'll do another one until you're happy.
Yeah.
Until you say yes. but you can't give me any advice.
Yeah.
You can't say make the type bigger,
Yeah.
change the color. You can't advise me in any way. You can just simply say yes or no.
Yeah.
And they said yes every time. And I did some of the best things I've ever done for them.
Wow.
Because I had the freedom to do it exactly the way I wanted to.
Yeah.
And people saw those things, and it led to other projects. You know, it kind of connected.
Was it right for them?
It was perfect for them. They love them.
Yeah.
They love them.
So you didn't just impose that on them?
No, I did what I thought was right.
Yeah.
I did the best I could. And they love them. And it was, and I've since done that for several projects. And in some ways I kind of do that for all the work I do. I do the best I possibly can. Now, you know, the projects now are so much more complex, and it's not just a poster. So I need advice. You know, I need advice of all kinds for the projects I do now. But that concept of actually engineering a way to do your best work, I think that's the key to getting a pure signal out.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the key to finding those people.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that it's interesting. I think a lot of people also struggle at actually finding that thing in the first place. Like you know, having that clear signal is great once you've worked out what it is. Mm-hmm. But it can be quite hard to find the thing that you feel that you've been put on this earth to do.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess my advice is just keep an open mind, keep looking, keep talking to people, observe what other people are doing. Yeah. You know, just know that it will come in time. It will reveal itself to you. And when it does, it's an amazing feeling, isn't it? Yeah. It's like having an idea.
I fell in love early. Like when I started putting images and words together, I just was enthralled with the magic of it. Yeah. And the idea of creating things was just so exciting that, you know, when you put two things together, you get a third. And that third is so unpredictable, and it's so, you know, it's so creative and so imaginative, and so exciting, and that really has been, you know, my whole life has been adventure of, you know, sort of finding those,
finding your way,
those things.
Let's talk about Pentagram, because we, as I said, we both went there. But would have very different experiences. Tell me what it was like for you, because you went from Sudbury, or was it Toronto, to London. I mean, how did that all come about, and what was it like for you? Because that's obviously at the time the design place on the planet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I had been working with a man in New York, had been doing some work for me, a man named Nigel Holmes. And he was the man who made the kind of graphic identity the visual identity for Time magazine.
Right.
He did all the kind of infographics.
Wow.
Incredible guy. And he was doing work for me in Toronto. And so I got to know him. And when I went to London, we went through New York. We went to New York and then flew from New York to London. And I stopped in to see Nigel, and he sent a telex.
Better explain what a telex is.
He sent a telex to the...
It's like Morse code.
Exactly. He sent a telex to the Pentagram office saying, you know, this guy's coming over and you should see him. And so when I went over, I called the office and arranged to have a meeting. And I ended up I must have done like 5 or 6 interviews there.
Wow.
With different people. And eventually was hired by David Hillman.
Fletcher would have been there.
I met Fletcher. Can't remember who else.
John McConnell, probably.
And John McConnell was
Theo
there.
Theo Crosby.
I didn't interview with Crosby, but he was there at
Kenneth
the time.
Grange.
Grange
Yeah.
was there. And so I got a job with Hillman, and it was fantastic. And the deal was, it was a very interesting model, which was you had only 2 years,
Yeah.
never more. So you had.
It was in the contract, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
ours
2
was
years.
3 years. They must have extended to 3 years when I joined, but
Really?
yeah.
At that time, it was 2 years in and out. And,
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone had stayed for more than 2 at that time.
No.
Eventually, one of the guys who was there at the time when I was there would eventually become partner.
John Russell.
Yeah, John Russell. And
he was the guy I worked with.
Right. But he, as far as I know, I think he may be the only one who did. At least at that time, it was well understood, 2 years in and out.
Yeah,
What that meant is that you worked your ass off. Like, you had 2 years to kind of build a portfolio. And I loved it. Like, I had incredible projects that I never would have had access to.
No.
But I had a lot of conflict. And David liked conflict.
Yeah.
Like, he loved it when there was fights.
Yeah.
Like when there was, almost fisticuffs.
He's still around, so we got to be careful what we say. Yeah, he's a feisty chap.
No, he
never trusted
this would
me
not
either.
come as this wouldn't come as a surprise to him. I mean,
Yeah.
he loved the conflict, and he made it was clear.
Talented too.
I did not. I mean, I didn't like that part of it, and I didn't like for me, there was a kind of sense. It was by then really corporate, so it was really working mostly for big corporations, and I got more and more the feeling that I was kind of building a cage that I was going to have to live in. That I was kind of.
How old were you then?
I was really young. I was like
how would you
21.
know that? Why did you think that?
I just felt like I was working for the corporate world, and that world it didn't have the interests of the person in mind. It was really the corporate interests.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I wasn't very sophisticated politically. It wasn't. I wasn't, and I wasn't deeply unhappy. I was excited by, I worked constantly.
Yeah.
I loved working. I still do.
Yeah.
And when I eventually quit, before my 2 years was up, because the conflict with David was so intense that, we were going very different directions aesthetically.
Right.
And I didn't think that was healthy for the client.
Yeah. Well, he was the boss, though, wasn't he?
And he was the boss.
Yeah.
So I said, look,
this
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I'm going this way, you're going that way. You're the boss.
Yeah. I quit. Screw you.
The writing's on the wall. It's like, I'm not gonna win this one. So you should do the right thing. And I'm not in the right place. And he said, look, it was not the right time for me to quit. So he said, look, I'd appreciate it if you would kind of finish what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I stayed on to do the thing, to kind of finish the projects that I was working working on, and he said, look, I'll back off. You do. It's better that you do the whole thing, and it have the kind of clarity that
Amazing.
That you suggest. And so I did that.
Yeah.
So it was disappointing to me in the sense that I had a kind of Pentagram at that point had a kind of almost mythical reputation to live up to that almost no organization could live up to.
Yeah.
And so
pressure.
it's not exactly surprising that it didn't.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was there for 5 years, actually. I went past the 3 year. I became associate partner after 3 years. But for me, it was the most important experience of my life. So very different experience because you clearly knew what you were about and what you wanted to do way back there. I was like, I had no idea what these guys were doing when I went there. I like, are they playing around with this stuff? What is they're trying to endlessly trying and changing and all that? And what it taught me was the power and the importance of getting it right. Big ideas, and knowing when it's right. You know, and I think that I hate the term graphic design. I hate that term like you do. I find it really limiting. And yes, that is a profession, but I found I'm much more about ideas. I'm a creative connector. I'm someone who is a generalist, someone who's passionate about all and any problem. And it's like, was it the pentagram experience that gave us the insight for that, or was it just us, the way that we kind of brought up, that's actually made us feel like our purpose is bigger than layout. Our purpose is bigger than fonts. It's all part of what we do, but the bigger opportunity is to use that thinking, that opportunity, the skills for bigger problems to be solved. You know, like there's a big shift, and a lot of people think I'm crazy saying that because they still think you should be back at typography and layout and doing what you're good at, which is like design. You know? Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's
no, I totally get it. And it also had I certainly had that experience as well. Like I had it in a very compressed time frame.
Yeah.
You know, I had it in 18 months, not 5 years. And
you've been competitive.
No, it just happened. It had a very intense, and it was a really important experience for me. I mean, it was also, I think, for me, one of the most important experiences in my life.
Yeah.
In that sense, right? The other thing that happened for me was that I was in England for the first time in my life. I was outside of Canada for the first time in my life.
That's huge.
I had no real experience with a class system.
No. Yeah, you're right.
So all of that was totally new to me, and I had no idea what was going on most of the time.
That's when my parents emigrated to Canada to get away from the class system.
I mean, I just didn't know I just didn't know what was happening most of the time. And I met two extraordinary people who both worked at Pentagram. One was an artist and one was a writer. And they were both brilliant. They were both politically tuned in.
Yeah.
In a way that I wasn't. I really had, practically no political kind of
young and naive
awareness. I had never really seen the state exercise its muscle. Like in Canada, the state was so, so kind of modest in its presence.
Yeah.
Like, with rare exception, it just didn't kind of assert itself, especially in my experience.
Yeah, it's a brilliant country.
And so coming to Europe and England, and kind of, being exposed to it during that time, I mean, this is Thatcher time.
Yeah.
The war in the Falklands.
Yeah.
The miners, the kind of firing of the miners. The homelessness in London was off the charts. I mean, you literally couldn't move. You had to walk over people.
There was the whopping strikes as well, wasn't there?
It was unbelievable, and the clubs, like Joy Division was.
Oh yes.
Was it? The Joy Division was in the clubs, and that was the kind of scene, and so I got kind of introduced into a kind of political scene that was very much at odds with the corporate world.
Yeah.
And that was part of that kind of awakening for me to kind of think, wow, this is, what am I doing here? And what am I part of?
So it was not aligned?
Yeah, the kind of misalignment, the kind of like, what am I contributing to?
Yeah.
Right? What am I working on? What is, and for me, it was a very simple equation. I love working. I'm going to put my waking hours into something.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
And I want to know what those things are. And so coming out of that experience, I started a company called Public Good. I mean, that's where...
Back in Toronto?
Yeah, I went back, and with two partners, we created a little studio in Toronto called Public Good. And the idea was really the kind of opposite of what happened at Pentagram, which was to say, I only want to work on things that I think are moving the world in the right direction, that are contributing to a positive world. And it wasn't more sophisticated than that. It was, we want to do public good. And I remember at the time, it was so controversial. I mean, it completely caught us by surprise because we thought, how much simpler can it get? I mean, we want to do public good. But designers that I knew told me to my face, they thought I was insane.
Yeah.
They were like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
That you can only work on good projects.
Yeah.
And I thought, what a crazy question.
Yeah.
Like that is an insane question to ask.
Do you think it's the Canadian upbringing? Because Canada's generally, Canadians are pretty peace-loving, nature-orientated.
I think it is part of the Canadian
John Denver
culture.
Was Joni Mitchell? Was she Canadian?
Joni Mitchell's Canadian. John Denver is not. He's
the car park song. What was that called? I mean, that's kind of like that has a peony. There was an exhibition in Vancouver called the Peony, I think it was. Like you had one in Toronto too, a big exhibition, kind of the future of the world. There's a lot of influences there. That
Expo 67 in Montreal.
Yeah.
No, Expo 67 was huge for me.
Yeah.
Like that really blew my mind, even though I didn't get to go to it.
Yeah.
I just saw it on TV, and it blew my mind. And it was part of, I mean, it's definitely like a huge part of my imagination that I saw this world out there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out there and be part of it. But that idea of public good really came out of Pentagram, and it came out of my experience with John and Herman at Pentagram. John was a writer. Herman was an artist.
Herman. Yeah.
Herman Lely and John Ward.
Right.
And John became my collaborator and editor on MC24.
Wow.
I worked with him
recently.
40 years later on MC24. But John was, he was a writer. He was, deeply connected to the kind of political realities in England, the kind of inequalities. And he introduced me to the kind of, political thinking that I hadn't really been exposed to in my life before. And Herman was an artist, and Herman, I thought Herman was the village idiot. Like Herman would come to work at 9:01.
Wow.
And he would leave at 4:59. And he would pad around in his sock feet. He was Dutch, and he would only work from during those hours. And the 5 o'clock came, Herman was out. And I thought, what kind of designer doesn't work late?
Yeah, and all weekend and every holiday.
And what kind of designer? And I didn't realize that Herman was an artist. He had a whole other life. He was friends with John Cage. He had an artist group called KLM. He was incredible. Like he had this whole other life.
Was he linked with Rem Koolhaas?
No. He just had this whole other art life.
Yeah.
And I discovered I'm the village idiot. Like he's a genius. Like he's got his own body of work, his own life, his own creative life.
Working 9 to 5.
I'm working 24 hours for the man.
Yeah.
I'm not
the hill man.
Yeah, the hill man. I'm working 24 hours. I'm pulling all-nighters.
Yeah.
For the corporate design job. He's working 9 to 5 and sustaining his outside creative life. And I realized, wow, this guy's really a genius. And it really, called into question that was part for me of discovering that, wow, I need to really think about, where is my work going?
Yeah.
What am I contributing to?
Yeah. But that's funny. The most I ever did there, because I was the same. I was like there day and night. I remember doing 2 nights in a row, like literally 48 hours without sleep.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what we were doing.
Yeah. But I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
But I was fucked from it. So this is kind of comes back to, okay, so were you an optimist then? Or were you like,
oh, yeah.
Screw everybody, I got to get out of here? Were you optimistic then? Or were you like, you felt downtrodden or
No.
caged?
No, not at all. I was very excited. Like when my friends in Toronto suggested we start something together, I was super excited, and I thought, great, we can use all this energy.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot. Like, you take all that power, all that creative energy. I mean, you think about your life and your creative energy and the time that you have to apply to something.
Yeah.
If you apply that to things,
it
changes the world.
Yeah.
Right?
So what you can do in an hour, what you can do in a weekend,
I mean, what we've done in the last month at UNSW, like, we've produced new concepts that could really transform the world.
Yeah.
Like in 4 weeks, with a small group of people.
Yeah. It's incredible.
And it's really extraordinary. And so when you start to think like that, you realize, when you start to apply that, when you start to think about how you can leverage that, how you can inspire other people to do the same, right? How you can get other people to do that.
Yeah.
The impact you can have is really extraordinary.
So this is the thing which I want to talk about, because it obviously is, we've established it's about ideas and design. I mean, I believe every human being is a designer, fundamentally. Every human being is creative, born creative. We're the lucky ones that find a career out of it, and it's been a phenomenal career, because this career now today, we get taken very seriously, that we actually can come up with ideas that actually can improve things dramatically. And organizations, individuals, countries, governments are looking for those ideas. So ideas are powerful, and they really, really matter, and they can make a massive difference. The question that comes up all the time in everything that we do is just like, okay, well, give me an example of where you have actually done that on a project. It's good talking about it. It's good to kind of instigate, the young talent and get them up to speed with understanding they have potential and the power to make a difference in the world for good. Mm-hmm. When you worked with Coca Cola, I mean, Coca Cola are still producing 200,000 plastic bottles a minute. It's insane amount. I mean, I believe that they should be held responsible to go and pick up every single bottle that they've ever produced, because they're still out there somewhere in the world, mostly in our oceans. What did you do with Coca Cola? Because obviously, when a client such as Coca Cola comes to you, and you're kind of wanting to do good in the world, you didn't just you would naturally go, nah, Coca Cola is the enemy. I'm not going to work with them. Right? I would do the same. Tobacco company or certain companies would come to me. I'd say, no, I'm sorry, that's not how. I'm not interested in working for you. But there was I want to talk about why did you take it on, and what impact did you have on that organization for good,
Yeah.
Because I think it comes down to like real examples of this actually working in the commercial world. I mean, the commercial world is going to play a massive part in shifting and changing towards doing things better.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is a very complex equation. In other words, when I was at Pentagram, I had a very simple kind of diagram, corporate bad, culture good, kind of, that kind of diagram.
Yeah. And no computers.
and before computers, it's hard to imagine. I mean, I can't remember how we actually got work done. I really can't. I can't recall.
It was very physical, wasn't it?
How we did things.
Yeah.
But that kind of like that very simple diagram. Eventually, we became much more nuanced about sort of how to actually change the world.
Yeah.
When it came to Coca Cola, we realized that their ambition, first of all, was sincere. And for me, that is really where we start. Like, we have to know that what you're trying to do is actually a real thing, that you really are sincere in what you're trying to accomplish. And there's no foolproof way of knowing that. But we have a pretty good methodology for determining that with interviews and analysis.
Lie detector test.
in a way, yeah. To kind of get a sense of are you really committed to doing this? And there's some questions we ask that can get to that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So are you really intent on doing it? And then what are the implications of that? What has to happen? And then secondly, what happens if we succeed? So one of the methodologies that we have is called running the numbers. And what we do is we basically just run the business as it is. Don't make it better or worse. Just run it for 50 years and see what happens. In the case of Coca Cola, they would have put 2.7 trillion PET bottles in the landscape in the world, and left 2.2 trillion of them in the environment. If we didn't do anything, right? So if you didn't do anything, just run it the way it is now, you're going to leave 2.2 trillion of those bottles in the landscape. Right? And we said, if you don't think that is a brand disaster, and that's not going to destroy the value of your $66 billion asset, which is your brand, you're not doing your fiduciary duty. Right? You have as the custodians of the business, you have an obligation to actually protect that brand, and you're not doing it if you ignore that. And so for us, the real opportunity was to say, how do we change that? You're not going to change it overnight. And you have to remember that, we think of Coca-Cola as a business, but it's not a business. It's actually an alliance of businesses. It's thousands of businesses around the world, and with very little actual control. So the headquarters of Coca-Cola actually has very little control over what happens around the world with the Coca-Cola brand.
That's scary.
Right? So each of the Coca-Cola companies around the world can as long as there are legal obligations, they have contracts, so they can't break those rules. But what they actually do is really determined by each company, by each locale. And so our job really is to inspire them, right? So what we have to do is to actually imagine a better world, show them that world, and show them the pathway to get there, and show them that it's so much better than what they're doing now. Yeah. So you have to sort of imagine this future, and say, look, this is, a world where we're not doing these things that damage the environment is truer to your brand. It's really true to what Coca-Cola is all about. If you want to refresh the world, you wouldn't do those things.
Teach the world to sing.
Yeah, you would never do, that brand would never do this. We're doing this by accident because we didn't see it happening, and we didn't figure out how to stop it. So we have to, first of all, see it, and we have to stop it. We have to change it.
But how come they're still doing 200,000 bottles a minute?
Because because you have to change those things. It means you have to actually develop new materials, which they have done.
Yeah.
So now they can actually recycle those bottles in perpetuity. Right. So when we started, the PET bottle could not be used again. The material had a one-time use. Yeah. Right. The material they're now using can be made into bottles in perpetuity. Yeah. And it's actually being used for the whole industry.
Yeah. Right. Well, made into clothing and things like that as well.
Yeah. And so you have to think of it as, you're not going to shut it off. You can't turn it off and turn it on again in a different way.
Yeah.
You have to kind of know that you're moving it slowly in the right direction. And you have to come to terms with that kind of compromised approach to change. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to move it in the right direction. And
like California has banned the water bottle, for example. Like or plastic bags as well. Like I mean, there is sudden change when people say, enough is enough and no more. We could stop this. Like I kind of feel like they should. I don't know. It's one of the world's oldest brands and biggest brands with a secret recipe. Like, who has secret recipes these days? Like it can't be a secret. It can't be sometime in the future we'll get our shit together. But I mean, I just think it's highly damaging the planet massively, health-wise too. That stuff is toxic. It's bad for you. Destroys your teeth, your gut. It does terrible things to your body as well as the planet and nature. Just talked to David Attenborough about that. It's interesting. Kind of, it's. I guess
when we did the work.
Yeah.
Because I worked with the head of global brand, a guy named Mark Mathieu, when we did that, and we did a program. The whole program was called Live Positively, and it was basically to, really comprehensively shift in this new way. When we were finished the work, we presented it at a brand conference in New York, big brand conference, and a young man came up to the microphone after the presentation, and he said, "If you really want to be sustainable, why don't you stop making Coke?"
Yeah.
And Mark was kind of
taken aback,
flabbergasted by that, understandably. But I said, actually, that's not a world I want to live in. Like,
you like Coke?
I like having a Coke, and I don't want to define the future negatively. Like, I don't want. I don't want to say, like, I love having a Coke, and I want to have a future where I can have a Coke, and I want, my kids to have a Coke. I just don't want to do it in a way that destroys the planet.
Yeah.
And there's no reason we can't do that.
No, currently we can't do that it doesn't destroy the planet, because it is, right?
Well, I don't think you. I think you can. Like, for instance, over 90%, 95% of all aluminum is recycled. Right? So all the cans that are used for the distribution are being captured.
Okay.
There's no reason we can't do that for the plastic.
Yeah.
Once you use the right material.
Yeah.
Which we now have.
Right. Okay.
Right? So there's no reason that we can't do the same for both materials, right? And we just have to get there in the same way.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that you have to get there for plastic in the same way that we've done for aluminum, and there's no reason that we can't do that. So
let's talk about. I think that what I discovered when starting out in the early days as a designer is that I couldn't see the future, but I could see the future of what I was working on. So in my mind, I could see if someone came to me and they said, "Hey, I got this brief, I got this problem, I got this thing I need to do." Already, as they were talking, I would start to piece together ideas, connect what they were saying with how that might look. Before it became, before we physically started to kind of put it down on paper and sort of make it. So human beings can, it's like storytelling. You tell me a story, and in my mind, all these amazing pictures, I can see the story unfold in my imagination. That's something that each and every one of us has, right? I'm not a freak. I spoke to an architect the other day, and he goes, "Yeah, I visualize, I see things in 3-dimension." I go, "What the hell do you mean by that?" It's like, I can see in my mind design in 3-dimension, in a physical space. was like, well, yeah, well, doesn't everybody? Like some people, I thought everybody can see. In a way, you're seeing the future because you're seeing an idea that's going to become a reality before it actually is a physical thing. Or you can see trends. I don't know if you're the same. I feel there's trends. I can see an idea that will come into market in a few years' time. On the back of what you feel or what you sense or we're incredibly sensory human beings, and maybe we'll talk about designing for all senses as well. But we're so much more powerful as individuals. We have so much potential to see a way forward and to actually act on that. And I think that's something that is within all of us. And I think that there's kind of like, I see that I'm using that on a very small scale. I'm using that traditionally. We're like looking at logos or brands or a magazine or an exhibition space or whatever, or a retail store, and like you can see in your mind what that might look like. So, do you have that same feeling or same?
Well, one of the reasons that we did design for all the senses is that we really focus design almost exclusively on what we see. So we cut off the rest of the sensory being.
Yeah.
And I think it's really it really puts us at odds with life. Like if you think about how we interact with the world, if we only use the visual sense, you get disconnected from the living world.
Yeah, of course.
Because you don't smell things, you don't feel things, you don't have the kind of
full body experience.
You don't have the kind of the kind of visceral connection to the living world, and you become capable, I think, of awful things,
right?
Because you're disconnected.
Yeah,
and
you're dictating,
you're only visual.
Yeah.
And I think that the screen is very problematic in that regard.
Yeah.
That it allows us to disconnect. It allows us to kind of it kind of pushes us more and more in the kind of disconnected world.
Yeah.
Where it's one
single dimension,
single sense. And so for what we did here in Sydney, and it really was a beautiful experience where we worked with people from UNSW to do a sensory, kind of full sensory experience, where people, we shut off the visual, so we created a blindfold where you can actually your eyes are open, but you look at blackness.
Yeah.
So you don't see any light, even though your eyes are open.
Yeah.
And
to heighten your other senses,
so that you can actually move your focus to your other senses and experience them.
Yeah.
And people, the reaction that people have, like a lot of people cried. The sound performance was really beautiful. We had a composition and a performance with musicians, and live musicians, and with a kind of intimacy that you've never experienced. For the most part, it was so interesting because the musicians experience it every day because they have an intimate experience with an instrument.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're, but the vast majority of us don't. When you go to a concert, a classical concert, the experience you have of that concert is actually really poor. You're sitting a long distance away.
Yeah.
The sound is really poor.
You can't smell them.
You can't. You don't have any real kind of. The actual sound of that instrument is really poor.
Yeah. You're not getting the vibrations.
You don't have the kind of real power of it. When you experience it in Design for All the Senses, people cried. because
one of my guys fainted, so that was pretty dramatic. Poor thing. First day as well. You could say that in the next interview. Yeah. People cried, people fainted.
I didn't want to bring that up.
Yeah. She survived. She's okay. Don't worry. You didn't even ask how she was. Come on.
No, but it's so intense when you really focus on it, like when you allow it.
Yeah.
When you open the space for that experience.
Yeah. Imagine what it's like to be blind or deaf or both. Or imagine a world like that.
And so what we're really kind of proposing is to say, look, we need to actually make design a methodology of the senses.
Yeah.
But all of our tools are for one sense only.
Yeah. Graphic design.
It's all visual.
Yeah. Color and fonts, shapes.
And so how do we begin to actually design for the rest of it?
Yeah. Full-heartedly and intentionally.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, obviously we practice that with our teams, and obviously when in the architecture or interior design, etc. Naturally is more so than our traditional graphic design. I know they're not in terms of customer experience and designing for real people, but
almost all architecture in interior design is bound by the image.
Render.
It's all rendering.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with the sound, for instance.
No.
The feeling, you just don't. It's not about the experience for the most part. Oh. And so it's really about, like, if you think about if you're going to do life-centered design and put life at the center and really think about the experience and, what it means to not put humans, not privilege humans over every other life form, and not, pass the cost onto somebody else of, everything that you do. It really is, taking another.
Well, the incredible thing about design is it can always be better, can't it? I mean, every time you do a job, I don't know how many jobs you've done. At the time, you think this is awesome, right? Yeah, and a lot, yeah. Done shitloads, been prolific. But you kind of think this is it. This is ultimate solution. And then you're like a year down the track, day down the track, you go, actually, I could have been better. Or you go back to a project. Or you see things in the real world and you go, you know what? That needs a redesign. And that happens all the time. You see more and more of that happening.
Have you been commissioned to redesign things that you've designed?
Brands, we've had to refresh brands, yeah.
Because we've had that experience. And, the kind of unstated assumption when you start a project to redesign something is the last guys weren't that bright.
Yeah, yeah. Hang on a minute, that was us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't realize that.
This time we're going to get it right.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're doing it to something that you designed, you realize, oh, actually, this is going to happen again. And that's why one of the principles is design the platform for constant design.
Yeah.
Right? That you are going to that these things are going to be continuously evolving.
Yeah.
Right? So
as the world changes to
instead
technology.
of thinking of it as trying to get it perfect and definitively right, build a platform that's built to evolve.
Yeah.
Knowing that it needs to, knowing that it's going to.
Yeah. What are you doing now?
What am I doing?
We're going to go have lunch in a minute. But what are you doing now? Generally, are you focusing on massive action?
Massive
kind of globally?
Action is a big focus right now. Yeah, I mean that's that's what we're doing here in Sydney with UNSW, and we're kind of building a coalition around the world to collaborate on that.
And what is it that? I mean, this is a question I constantly ask. I mean, I'm 58 next month, so I'm getting kind of old, and I realized when I turned 50, and I've said this many times on my podcast. When I turned 50, I really got, holy crap, I'm well over halfway, I think. And, when I was younger, those early days back at Pentagram, whole life ahead of you, thinking like you have forever to sort shit out, your life and, doing projects. Now you feel like I feel like I have a certain period of time. I don't know how long it is, but it's shorter than it was before. Mm-hmm. I know a hell of a lot more, but I don't know. I still feel a lot more to learn. It's like, I presume you're in a similar situation. We go, where do I put my energy today? Where do I put my energy as a human being into doing good, doing the right thing, using all that I know and I'm capable of, or my team and the people around me to instigate, to put my energy and my focus and people around me to doing good things. Do you feel the same way? I presume you do, right?
Yes. I mean, for me, the life-centered design is really critical. Like, to change from a human-centered focus. Mm-hmm. It's not about us. Right? Like, we have to change our understanding of where we are in the universe.
Yeah.
And, Copernicus happened hundreds of years ago. Right? He showed us that it's not about us.
Yeah.
Right? The universe does not revolve around us. But we've been trying to prove him wrong ever since. Mm. And human-centered design is another example of that. And, we've been working with a school in northern Canada called the McEwen School. It's a new architecture school. And I'm on the board of the school. I've been on the board for several years now, so 6-7 years. And it's a tricultural project with French, English, and Indigenous leaders.
Cool.
And so I've been going up there and learning from these guys.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is that their cosmology is completely different. They don't put humans at the center. They put life at the center.
Yeah.
So they actually said, one of the guys said to me, we think we're related to the rocks and the grasses.
Yeah.
Right? And, we did a project in Panama with Frank Gehry, a new Museum of Biodiversity, and we had this incredible experience. We went into the jungle with E.O. Wilson, who's probably the greatest life scientist of the last half century. And Wilson said, there's only one thing on the planet, and that's life. And life has an experiment in form, and we're one of those forms.
Wow.
That's all.
Yeah.
And he said, rock is slow life, and life is fast rock. So you are rock animated with electricity.
Right.
And when we turn the electricity off, you go back to rock.
Yeah.
So here you have the preeminent life scientist telling us the same thing that our indigenous leaders are telling us.
Yep.
That we are related to the rocks and the grasses.
And the same here with the Aboriginal
and the same
elders as well. Saying the
caring
same
for
thing.
Country is telling us the same thing.
Yeah.
That we are related to the rocks and the grasses. So we have to understand our place in the universe differently, and we have to design with life at the center.
But that comes from having a sense of responsibility that needs to happen, right?
We have to change almost everything we do.
Yeah.
So it gives us a completely different kind of outlook on, and it changes. So, the way that we are, like what we've been doing at UNSW, the way that we're talking about massive action is to say we have to, when it comes to the natural world, to the wild, we have to preserve, protect, and design the living world. So it's not enough just to protect it. We have to actually to design and expand it. We have to actually take responsibility for it, right? So that's on one side. And then the other, we have to actually redesign everything we do to be compatible with life.
Yes.
So almost everything we do is not.
No.
So we have to change almost everything.
Yeah. And
then finally, the kind of foundational piece is to empower people with the capacity of design. To give, our project with UNSW is to imagine empowering 100 million designers. Mm. Like, imagine giving 100 million people the capacity to be designers.
Yeah.
We have no idea how to do that, how we're going to accomplish that.
Yeah.
But that's really the kind of ambition of Massive Action, to say we need to give people that empowerment, that capacity to design their own life and the world around them.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that obviously the important thing is people to understand the potential of designing their own life, and it not being seen as an egotistic thing to do. You know, that actually they have to be the best they can be, healthy, etc., to enable them to tackle doing these tasks. You know.
Earlier you mentioned accidental, right? That it's not accidental, and for me that's the kind of bifurcation. It's either accidental or by design.
Yeah.
Like you either allow for random events.
Yeah.
Or you
Fate.
choose design, like you design
Luck.
outcomes.
Yeah.
And the moment that you want specific outcomes in your life, you're a designer.
Yeah, you got to be determined. You got to be clear about the deadline, what you want to achieve.
Yeah,
how
whatever
you're
it
gonna get
is,
there.
like whether it's a birthday party, you know, like whatever the outcome is, the moment you have a specific outcome, you're a designer.
Exactly. That's exactly what. That's why I did the book Design Your Life, because I realized that I could take, the design principles I learned in working on projects for clients that have a deadline, that have a brief, etc. We take those very seriously every time, but we don't tend to take our life as seriously as that.
Yeah.
We put all of our heart and energy into pleasing others, etc., giving out, and it's not until you hit a wall a few times that you realize you can't keep doing it. You've got to change. You got to adjust. You got to, design your life. Yeah. Have you designed your life, Bruce C?
To some degree, it keeps getting away on me. I have to keep redesigning it.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that constant adjustment, constant challenge. Learning is the kind of key thing to it all, and all the people you meet through life is amazing. Life is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for coming together to have a chat today.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Design Your Life with the legendary Canadian designer, Bruce Mao. Stay tuned for future vodcasts, and thank you for the University of New South Wales for helping reconnect Bruce and I in Sydney, Australia.